I wanted to make this sort of relevant generically to starting startups. And there's a million different startups. Like we just heard 10 entrepreneurs talk about what they're working on, and they were probably, the corners of a 10-dimensional sphere in 10-dimensional space. They were so different. But here's some subjects that are really pretty much common to startups: telling your story, fundraising, building a great team, and then marketing, which I think these are kind of relevant subjects. So here's a little bit about me. This is my densest slide, and I will not read it to you. I was with a company called Digital Insight that was located here in this area. In the mid-90s, we were the first, one of the first companies to do home banking on the internet. And that was kind of exciting because we used to start every presentation with, this is the internet. And I remember we would set up this really complicated system so that we could ping a server in London. And we'd get this ping back, and everybody would be like, ooh, you're talking to London. So from DI, I went on to join Intuit, which you guys probably know of as the Quicken company, or maybe for QuickBooks or TurboTax. That was in the late 90s when every successful desktop software company was trying to figure out what's our internet strategy. So they found me and they said, maybe he can help us figure that out. And I led a team that built and launched Quicken.com. So that was a lot of fun. And while I was part of that team, I met some very interesting entrepreneurs at a little company called PayPal. And I'm sure you guys have all heard of PayPal. At that time, there was a sort of Cambrian explosion of little companies doing online payments. And then the challenge was, how do you build a big company that sort of sticks its nose out from that pack? So, so I was with PayPal. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. And then I took a little time off, and I co-founded a company called Aperio that is the leader in digital pathology. So did that for 12 years. I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And then kind of as a spin out of that, a few years ago, I started a company called EyesFinder. We're right here in Westlake Village. So as Mike said, there are some startups here. And our focus is visual search. We're creating visual search applications for people so that you can take a picture and do a search instead of typing. So that's enough about me. Telling your story. This is like the most important thing if you're an entrepreneur. The most important thing. And in fact, I would suggest that it's the only important thing. If you are good at telling a good story, then you can be successful. You can recruit people to your team. You can get investors to invest in you. You can find partners who want to work with you. And you can find customers who want to buy your products. You have to have a great story, though, and you have to be good at telling it, and that takes a lot of practice. So I think of the stories of a company as having three pieces. You're sort of, where are you today? You're this little team of people that have a certain set of skills and a certain set of experience and maybe a certain unique approach. And then you have this vision. What is the future going to look like after you're done? And that vision is what drives the story. Everybody has to believe that that vision is important. Maybe it's autism and eliminating or reducing the effects of autism. That's a big idea, right? So how do I get to that? And then the third part is the path. How are you going to get from where you are today to where you want to go? And going back into my history, I have failed at that, and I have been part of a team that has succeeded at that. And right now at EyesFinder, I'd say we're sort of in the middle of that. So let me tell you those stories, because I think one of the best ways to illustrate something is through telling stories. So I'll tell a story about telling stories. When I was at PayPal, we had this little team of people, and we had this grand vision. We were going to completely eliminate banking and credit cards and the whole financial infrastructure and create a new world currency. That's a pretty big vision, right? No one could accuse us of thinking small. But we honestly felt like that was something that was achievable. But here we were, this little group of people. And the key to that was really to find the right path. And as you're telling your story, it's really great if you can weave it into things that are going on. So, for example, right now, drone technology is a huge thing. So if you were working on a company that in any way had anything to do with drone technology, let's say you were working on a visual search project, for example, weaving that into your story would be really important. That's part of the fabric. Maybe social media, right? A few years ago, everybody was talking about social networks and everything is social. And if you can weave that into your story. So when we were at PayPal in the late 90s, the biggest story on the internet was auction sites. And not just eBay, by the way. There were tens of them. Every big portal had some sort of auction site. And so the path that we saw from getting from this little group of people who had a certain skill set to this grand vision was to make settlement of auctions easier and faster and more reliable. And that gave us a realistic path to get from where we were to where we wanted to go. And that made for a good story. People could buy into that story. Now, in 2002, I was part of a founding team, and we had a unique technology for digitizing microscope slides. I don't know how many of you know a lot about pathology, but I'll just give you a quick primer. So, oversimplifying, all of medicine can be divided into two pieces, diagnostics and therapeutics. What's wrong with you and how are we going to fix it? So, if you look at medical diagnostics, it's this incredibly quantitative field. If you go into any lab in the world and you give them a drop of blood, you can put it in a chemical analyzer and you'll get 30 chemicals out to the 15th decimal place. And it'll be exactly the same whether you're here or Bangalore or the tip of Africa. But in the middle of medical diagnostics is pathology, which is not like that at all. Pathology is completely human pattern recognition. There's no quantification at all. The specimen has to be in the same place as this highly paid human expert. It's not reproducible. It's highly error prone. So the theory behind Apereo was we're going to make pathology like every other field in diagnostic medicine. We're going to make it quantitative. So that was a big idea. Let's make medical diagnostics for pathology quantitative. And we had this awesome technology. But we were never able to tell a good story about how we were going to get from here to here. And I think we didn't even know that that was a problem. We were really focused on the technology and our customers and what products can we build. And we liked telling that story. It was very motivating and exciting for us. There were a lot of people who got involved in the company because of that vision, but we weren't able to really tell that story in a clean way. And Apereo, although it was successful, today it's a company of about 400 people. It sold for several $100 million, and it has about 2,000 labs as customers. It's not a home run in the way that PayPal was, and I think that's because we were never able to tell the story. And the final story about stories I'll tell is my little company, EyesFinder. So we have a big vision. We think visual search is going to be as big as text search. We think everywhere there's a text search box, there's going to be a little button that says, click to do a visual search. And we think that because every single person in this room has an internet-connected camera in their pocket. And when you think about all the things that are around you, if you see a pair of shoes you like, or a person you want to meet, or a building, or a piece of art, and you want to learn more about it, what could be easier than taking a picture and doing a search? That's a big vision, right? That's a Google-sized vision. Here we are, we're this little team of engineers, and we have this awesome technology, but how are we going to get from here to here? What's that path? And we're still figuring that out, honestly. It's a work in progress for us. We have customers, we have markets that we're trying to address, but we don't have that complete story yet. And in fact, when I talk to investors or potential investors in my company, I tell them that what your money will help us do is figure out how to get there. We're going to learn how to tell that story together. Yes?
Would a story be a testimonial?
It could be. It certainly could be, especially if it, if it helps whoever you're telling the story. Stories are communication, right? So if it helps get the idea. Did everyone hear the question, by the way? I'm really bad at repeating questions. The question was can a story be a testimonial? And I think it can't only be a testimonial, but it's certainly a big part of a story if you have a proof point, right? If it helps people believe you. So in telling the story, it's really helpful to refine it. What problem are you solving and why you? Those are two good questions to ask yourself for every entrepreneur. And hopefully you can answer those questions and make that part of your story. I think this is super important. And I think that like getting up in front of people, it's not always comfortable. Having 1 minute to talk about something that you spend all day thinking about, it's really a challenge. But it's great. It's great, and the feedback that you get from that is really good. And the first time you do it won't be your best time, but you'll get better and better at it. You'll learn what things resonate and practice telling your story, because you're going to be telling it a lot. You're going to be telling it to potential investors. You're going to be telling it to potential employees. You're going to be remotivating your team with that story as you try to form partnerships, as you have customers. It's all about that original story. A big part of the story has to be the business model. I'm probably a little old school, but I don't believe, in the billions of eyeballs and somehow you'll figure out how to monetize it later kind of a business. I know there are people who've made a lot of money that way, but I don't think that's building a business. I think you have to have a business model. You really have to think about who's my customer, what's my target market. And it doesn't have to be the grand vision either, right? So, for example, at PayPal, our ultimate target market was everybody. We wanted everybody to be buying everything with PayPal all the time. But we knew that getting from where we were to that was impossible. So we had to start small. So we said, well, maybe if we make it easier for this guy to buy a lawnmower from that girl, that would be a place to start. And so that was our target market, is just people selling on eBay. And then you have to think through, what's the pricing model? Does that make sense for people? Is it really going to work? You can test that. And then what's your distribution? How are people going to learn about you? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of apps out there. You could have the world's greatest app for something and no one will ever know. So just building the most awesome app in the world is not necessarily going to ensure your success. I'm going to check out this app. This sounds really cool. But my advice to SeatSurf would be, how are people going to learn about you? And if you're taking people to events, maybe something about the event itself can help publicize you. You can work some sort of deal with them. That's a really important part, is distribution. What's your distribution going to look like? Who do you need to partner with? And how are people going to find out about you? How's your target market going to find out about you? Okay, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about fundraising. Fundraising is a lot more than a necessary evil. It's hugely important. It's a validating step. So sometimes people will say to me, well, it's great, you started this company and you don't have to raise any money. You can fund the company yourself. But that's actually a really bad thing to do. Because if you can't get people you like and respect to write big checks to be a part of what you're doing, maybe what you're doing is not that great. Maybe what you're doing is great, but you haven't figured out how to tell the story yet. And the process of fundraising is a great way to validate that. So I think that it's not only a necessary evil, but it's a really important part of building a company. And you have to have a plan. You have to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try to raise X dollars at Y valuation. You will probably never actually hit those numbers, but X is going to go down and Y is going to go down. But you have to have a plan. You have to have an idea in mind, and you have to know what you're going to do with the money, and really have a detailed plan of how you're going to carry this out. I'm old, and when I was not so old, and people wanted to start companies, they always wrote a business plan. And it was a 20 to 30 page document. and it had, a well-defined set of subjects, and you just did that. That was just something that you did when you wanted to start a business. And then when investors wanted to invest in you, they would look at that plan, and they would, learn a lot more about you and your story and how carefully you had thought about it. And business plans have fallen out of favor. There's so many companies now that the entrepreneurs don't create a business plan, and when they go and try to raise money, the investors don't even want to see the business plan. But I'll tell you, first of all, I'm an entrepreneur and not really an investor. So from the entrepreneur side, it is super valuable to write that plan, even if no one reads it. Even if no one on your team reads it. I mean, it's great to show it to as many people as possible and get their feedback. But just for yourself, to go through that exercise of writing a business plan is super important. From the investor side, I'd say this. Let's say that you're playing chess and a grandmaster walks into the room. He could glance at that chessboard and know immediately what had happened on that chessboard. He'd know what openings had been played and who was in a stronger position, and he'd probably even be able to give a lot of advice, like, you need to control the center, or you're weak over here. And they can do that because of their experience and their training and, a whole bunch of things that add up to why they're a grandmaster chess player. And I think that's true for some investors too. They have seen so many companies and they have worked with so many entrepreneurs that when they hear a pitch, they know right away whether it's someone they want to work with, whether it's a business idea that makes sense, whether the market makes sense, the partnerships, and so on. So they can take a shortcut around your 30-page plan, and they can say, I'm not interested, or wow, I'm excited. But there's a lot of other investors that don't have that skill that maybe should be looking at more plans. I know for myself, whenever anyone wants me to invest in their business, I want to read their plan. I want to know that they wrote a plan, and I'm very excited to see it. And it also helps me help them. Like, maybe I can spot a weakness or make a suggestion or make an introduction that could help them. So, I think having a plan is really important. And I'm going to touch on this again, but I think that you have to look past the next round. So maybe you've decided in order to get started, I need to raise $400,000, and that's going to get me through my first year to a year and a half. But think about what's the next raise after that, and what's that raise going to look like? What's the next raise after that, and what's that raise going to look like? You won't be right, but it's very helpful to think about that and to think in those terms. So there's really sort of two mechanisms for raising money at the beginning of a startup: convertible debt and a priced round. And I just want to make a few comments about them. They sort of go in and out of favor. At the moment, it seems like a lot of people are doing convertible debt, and a little while ago it wasn't as popular, and that probably means that in a little while from now it won't be as popular. But with convertible debt, you basically are taking money from an investor, and it's structured as a loan. So you have to pay the loan back. And then at some point in the future, you will do a priced round, and then when the priced round occurs, then the investors that have loaned you money will be able to convert their debt into an investment in that priced round. And the big advantage of this is that you don't have to make a decision about what the company is worth today. You're sort of punting on that and moving it into the future. So for example, let's say that I raise $400,000 today, and I do it as convertible debt. I can give my investors a 20% discount to the next round. And then let's say in a year, I raise money, and the valuation of the company at that next round is $2 million. Okay, so I'm doing nice growth. Now, what I really am doing is I'm giving those early investors a chance to invest in my company at a $2 million valuation. They're investing $400,000, and I'm giving them a 20% discount. So they're actually going to get 20% more of that round than they would have. That's basically how it works. And again, the advantage is that I don't have to figure out how much the company is worth today. A professional investor who leads the priced round in the future is going to determine that. So that's sort of the advantage of it, and I think one of the reasons why it's become popular, because it is super hard to value an idea or a startup with 3 people, right? I mean, that is just really, really difficult to do. And so it's kind of nice to be able to punt that into the future. I was going to say some other things about this, but I think I'm going to move on. Now, a priced round is a more conventional financing where there's a lead investor who sets the price, and they say we're going to invest a certain amount of money at a certain price. There may be other investors who then invest at that same price, at that same valuation. And that's, that's a conventional financing, and usually you issue preferred stock to those investors. And there are some preferences that go along with this. And one just caution, if you're a new investor, these preferences can be really, really important. You might be super excited that, wow, I got Kleiner Perkins to invest $2 million in my company at $8 million pre. So, that's not the whole story, though. If they have a 5x liquidation preference, then you're in big trouble. Because that means that you're going to have to deliver 5 times what they put in back to them before anybody else gets anything. So it is really good to sort of look at the fine print and look at the preferences on liquidation and voting when you do a priced round. And you can either look at that yourself, or you can get somebody that you trust that has been through it before, somebody who has some battle scars to look at it for you. But this is, this is as important in a way as the amount and the valuation. The perfect situation in a company is where everybody is aligned and everybody wants the same thing. And the problem with these preferences is they misalign people. They put the management team and the early shareholders and the seed investors on one side, and then the new preferred investors are kind of on a different side, and they create misalignment. And that's never a good thing. It's always better if everybody's on the same team, everybody has the same motivation, and you're all sort of working toward the same goal. And to that end, it's always good to think about the next round, because whatever terms and conditions you took on in this round are the terms and conditions that you are going to be bringing to the next round. And the next potential investors are going to look at that, and they're going to say, well, I love what you're doing. You have a great story, but this deal that you struck with your investors, I can't be a part of that. I mean, that's just going to be too difficult for me to be a part of. That's not the end of the story, because if the original investors want those new investors in, then maybe they'll change their terms. But it is good to think about the next round. So who are the people that might possibly invest in you? There's really sort of 4 kinds of people. First, there's friends, maybe even family if you count them among your friends. These are people that are typically investing in you, not necessarily in your story. And they're great early investors because they know you, they believe in you, and they will help you refine the story. Maybe you don't have that complete connection from where you are to where you want to go, and they can help you get there. So this is not to be neglected. Then there's professional investors, and the bar sort of moves around, but I think right now the bar is at around 4 million. So it'll be difficult to get VCs to put less money than that into a company, which means they probably aren't going to be a great seed investor for a startup. And this just comes from the fact that these people are managing a lot of money. And it costs just as much effort for them to watch an investment of $4 million as it does $40 million. I mean, they probably will give a little more attention to the company that has 10 times more money in it, but they still have to go to the board meeting, they still have to talk to the CEO, they still have to check your numbers, they still have to help you recruit, blah, blah, blah. And they want to add that value. And so if they're putting too little money in, then they won't be able to do that. One way to dance around this that is a little bit less popular now than it used to be is to do like a 2-tranche round where people say, all right, I'll put $2 million in now and I'll put another $4 million in if you hit certain targets. That's great because then you already have that next round sort of locked in, and you kind of can work with the same investor group. So it's not a bad thing if you can arrange something like that. In my experience, though, those targets tend to get distorted. Like what you think you're shooting for in a year to get to the next tranche is not what you're really going to end up shooting for. And then you have to have this discussion. Like, I know we said that our goal was going to be 27 customers in 12 markets, but now we've pivoted into this other model, and so our goal is really this. Those are tough conversations. VCs are really good at looking at future scenarios. They're always thinking about what is the next round and the next round. How much money is this company going to need to get to profitability? How much money is this company going to need to get to an exit? What are the opportunities for me down the line? If I put in $4 million now, is that it? Or can I put in $4 million now and $20 million in another year or 2 years and put $24 million to work because this company is going to be the next Google? So that's the kind of story that VCs are really looking for. One great thing about professional investors is they will give you a fast no. These are busy people who look at 1 million business plans, and they do not want to spend time with a company that they are not going to invest in. So it's pass-fail. You have one shot to tell your story. If they think that there's a chance, then they'll want to hear more. But 9 times out of 10, they'll give you a polite, this is great, but it's not for us kind of an answer. And then you move on. You don't have to spend more time with them. The final thing I'll say about professional investors is, okay, so you wrote this 30-page business plan and you sweated over every word in it. And you have these financials at the back that come from this spreadsheet that is just an absolute work of art where you've made every possible assumption, you've thought about every possible customer, and you have this incredible story, but yet you really only have 15 minutes in front of a group of people to tell your story. And you have to get their attention right away. This is where, once again, that story is just so important. And you have to get their attention. And I think of it a lot like sex appeal. When you first meet somebody, you're either attracted to them or you're not. And you could think about it for days, why do I find this person so attractive? But the fact is it's either there or it isn't. And that's kind of how it is for investors, I think, looking at a business. They're either excited about what you're doing or they're not. And you have to get them excited about what you're doing. That gets right back to that telling of the story. It has to be a good story, but it also has to be told cleanly and in a way that gets their attention. And then, once they are excited about what you're doing, then you can show them the 30-page business plan and you can answer all their due diligence questions about the customers and the partners and the people you have to hire and the technology and the patents and all that. The final group, or not the final group, but a third group that you might approach for funding are angels. The line between angels and professional investors is getting blurrier, but I would say in general, angels are amateurs. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean they're retired, successful people who enjoy and are excited by building little companies. They generally will come in at lower levels. They often come in groups. So sometimes you'll get a super angel to write a big check. Other times you'll get 4 or 5 people together who all, think that your idea is interesting. I would say one thing about angels is they generally are looking for you to get VCs involved. So their goal is to get out, put their money in, and then have a bunch of other people come in that are professionals to worry about delivering a return. So most experienced angels, when they're looking at your startup, they're thinking, what is it going to take to get a VC excited about this business? That's the thought in their mind. If they think that it's likely that you're going to use their money to make enough progress to get to the point where a professional VC is going to want to invest, then they're excited. That's really what their thought process is. They're not thinking, are you going to be the next Google or are you going to cure autism? They're thinking, am I going to be able to get benchmarked to invest in this company? And that's when you tell the story to angels, that's kind of what they're looking at. And you have to be aware that with angels, you're dealing with a slower no. They're not in as much of a hurry, and they enjoy the process. So you might end up taking 10 meetings with angels who, maybe aren't even really that excited about you, but they're hoping to get more excited, and so they keep having dinner with you, hoping that they find you more attractive. That can be the bad part of angels. I have learned this the hard way, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're at that very early stage and you're trying to get better at telling your story. This is a great way to get better at telling your story, because every time you talk to them, you have another chance to get better. And maybe the people that you ended up, that ended up investing in you weren't part of that, but you benefited from having a better way to tell the story. The last group of people that are not to be neglected are strategics. Businesses that might want to invest in you because they want to partner with you to get value out of what it is that you're building. And what's great about this is that these businesses are more concerned with the value that they're going to drive in their business out of partnering with you than with valuation. So you can raise money more effectively. You don't get involved in these big arguments over what your baby company is worth. And it can help you jumpstart distribution. I apologize to the SeatSurf people, but this came up. So if SeatSurf partners with Avalon, who are a big event producer, that could be really awesome, right? Maybe Avalon puts in some money, and they get distribution right out of that deal, and it works out really well for them. Sorry, just a good example. I'm not trying to tell you, what to do, but it can distort your business focus, because once you're in bed with a big partner like that, then they're your big partner, and you're not going to do things that they don't want you to do, like work with their competitors. And also, you may be putting all your resources into working with them instead of getting to that grand vision. So you also have to sort of watch for future competitive conflicts. There are explicit exclusivities, but there's also implicit ones where once you're working with one company in a space, it's going to be very difficult to work with their competition. Okay, let me talk a little bit about building a great team. Super, super important. How many people think it's a great idea to start a company by yourself? Nobody raised their hands. How many people are asleep? No. So having partners is really a great idea. It gives you people to work with, to get up in the morning, to go to sleep at night with, to spend your day with, and talk about everything. It's just so, so important. There are certainly startups that do succeed with a single founder, but I would say that more times it's better to find somebody who you really get along with, who you can partner with, and co-found a company. And you don't have to have equal shares in the business. Of course, if the company ever becomes really valuable, those relative proportions are going to become a source of friction. So you do have to think about it a lot. What kind of sweat equity are you going to offer to partners? But it's really good, and it's important to complement yourself. I mean, you can be any kind of person and start a company, but if you're an engineer who doesn't have a lot of marketing or business development skill, maybe partnering with somebody who does have skills in that area would be a great idea for you. Even if all the people you get along with are engineers. A company founded by 10 engineers is still going to need some business people in the company, and vice versa. So you want to be able to get along with your partners and feel really comfortable, but also they should complement you, and that means you have to be introspective about what are you good at. And don't aspirationally think that, wow, I'm an engineer, I can do anything, I'm going to become a great salesperson. Wouldn't it be better to partner with a friend of yours that you really like, who's already a great salesperson and off and running? Now, a key thing in building a team is the motivation of the team. Why are people joining you? And this, again, this just gets back to telling that story. So if people believe that you're going to revolutionize medical diagnostics, or you're going to change the financial industry, or you're building a visual search engine that's going to be as big as Google, they want to be a part of that. That's exciting. That's fun. That's why you come to work. And so being part of something big and cool is a major reason why people join startups. Working with good people is also really important. So the great thing about hiring good people is that then you have good people for other good people to work with. And so it's sort of a positive snowball. Those very early hires are really important. You have to be people that you really like and trust and want to work with. And I think it's important for people who join a little company to think of it in terms of the growth that they're going to get out of it. So, you know, when you, as just an ordinary investor, when you buy a stock, there's sort of two different kinds of stocks. There's growth stocks and value stocks. Value stocks pay a dividend at some interval, and growth stocks maybe don't pay a dividend, but they become more valuable over time. So when you're working for a company, you're the stock. And sometimes when you're working for a company, you're a value stock. You get your salary, you know, you go home, you buy your car, your television, and you're happy. But other times, you're a growth stock. You're working for the company, and what you're getting out of that, yes, you're earning a salary, but you're growing. You're learning to do new things, you're meeting new people, you're developing new skills, your resume is getting stronger, and you're becoming more valuable. So that's part of the motivation for people to join a company, and that's part of the story that you should tell them when you're trying to get them to join your company is, yeah, you could join Lenovo, but if you joined our little company, look at all the cool things you'll be able to do. So that's really part of having a great work environment. I have found that compensation and benefits are not a big deal to people who are joining a startup. And it's a good filter. So if you're hiring somebody and they start asking you about your 401k plan and your matching and, you know, whether you have Blue Cross or Blue Shield, you might not be talking to somebody who really wants to join a startup. I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but they should be pass-fail. They shouldn't be the reason why someone is joining your company. And the final thing that's kind of in this category is you have to be super aware of title inflation. You know, when you have 3 engineers and you hire a leader, that person could be your VP of engineering, but then, you know, what are you going to do later, right? If you decide after you have 20 people that maybe that person is no longer able to run that team, they were great running 3 people, and they should still be running 3 people, but now you need to hire someone in over them. Now you start with the SVP, EVP, Associate VP kind of stuff, and it just doesn't work. So what I like to do, and what I've done at EyesFinder, is use non-traditional titles so that we get away from that entirely. I'm sure someday we will have VPs, but we're not there yet. So you know, we found cool names. We basically tell people you can design your own title when you join us. And you just have to be really careful. This is another thing that if somebody is super concerned about what their title is going to be when they join your company, you know, maybe they're not perfect for a startup. So I think it is really important to make a hiring plan. Even if you disregard my advice and don't write a business plan, at least write a hiring plan. Exactly who you need. You're going to be wrong. You will never be able to anticipate everybody you will need. You probably won't be able to afford everybody that you wish you could have hired. But man, it sure is helpful to think about what is each person going to do? Who do I need? And when am I going to need them? And then revise that plan all the time as things change in your business. Just keep going back to that. And it's actually a really important thing in running your business, but also as you talk to investors about your business, that's going to be the main use of funds for most little companies, is hiring people. So if somebody says, okay, you know, I'm excited about putting $500,000 into your idea because I believe your story, what are you going to do with that money? And you say, oh, I'm going to hire 7 people. And here's what they're going to do. 4 of them are going to be engineers. This guy's going to be a Java programmer. This guy's going to build my mobile app. This guy's going to be my DBA. I need a marketing person, and I need, you know, and suddenly they're like, wow, this guy's thought about his business. That's cool, right? If you say, well, I think I might need 10 people, that's not a good answer. All right, let me say just a couple words about finding people. the best way to find people is if you already know them. Really, events like this are a great way to meet people, and then really cultivate your LinkedIn network and your Rolodex. And someone that you've worked with in the past, even if it was a long time ago, is automatically somebody that you would love to work with. I just met Charles. Raise your hand, Charles. What did we work together 15 years ago? Right. So, Charles isn't looking for work, and I'm not looking for someone who's doing what Charles is doing, but if I had a chance to hire Charles or work with him, I would totally take it because we know each other and we've worked together in the past. So this is really important. And then use LinkedIn as a tool in two ways. First of all, for referrals. How many people have ever sent out a request to your friends on LinkedIn like, do you know of a good web designer or do you know of a good PR person? I mean, that's just awesome, right? Because if one of your friends comes back to you and says, I worked with this person and she's great, then that's almost as good as if you worked with them yourself, right? That was the whole theory that Reed had behind LinkedIn when he started it, was that leveraging your network like that. And then I've found that Stack Overflow is the best place to find engineers. Usually one of the hardest things to do as a startup is to find engineers, and Stack Overflow is a great place to find engineers. How many people have heard of Stack Overflow? Or know if you're an engineer, you know about it, and if you're not, maybe you don't, but it's relatively inexpensive. You can post an ad for, I think, $300 on Stack Overflow, and you can find people who are looking for work. If you're an engineer and you're looking for a job and your resume is not on Stack Overflow, then you're not really an engineer looking for a job. And conversely, if you're a company and you're looking for engineers and you're not looking for them there, then you're missing out. So I'm not a big fan of recruiters. I don't know, it bothers me. I mean, it's one thing to have to pay an engineer $100,000 a year. They're going to do great work for you, but to pay a recruiter $20,000 to find that engineer, it's just, I'd rather run a whole bunch of LinkedIn and Stack Overflow ads and talk to 1 million people and, beat the bushes and try to find people that way. At the end of the day, you might have to do it, but I don't know, it's not great. You would think, by the way, just parenthetically, there should be something in between a LinkedIn ad for $400 and a recruiter for $20,000, right? There's a market, there's an opportunity there. I don't know, it's ripe for disruption. Let me talk a little bit about the process of hiring. I am a huge fan of asking candidates to do some sort of an exercise. If it's an engineer, ask them to write code. If it's a marketing person, ask them to design a little marketing plan. If it's a PR person, ask them to do a PR exercise. That does two things. First of all, it weeds out people who are just really tire kicking, that are not serious about wanting to work for you. I know it feels like, boy, if I only could just talk to that person, I could get them excited, even if they aren't already. But I don't know, it's a good filter. If people are willing to take 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to create a good exercise response for you, that just immediately validates them. And then if they don't, then they sent you a resume and they couldn't come back with a response to your exercise request, then you don't have to talk to them anymore. It's a really good upfront filter. And it even can become a conversation piece later. I have a coding exercise involving a pool table that I've used for 10 years. And I sometimes end up talking to the candidate about that exercise when I'm actually doing a face-to-face interview. And they'll be like, yeah, I tried to do this, and then I did it like this. It's a good conversation starter in an interview. So then I think phone screens are really efficient. It's a good use of car time or Uber time. And you can probably tell in 10 minutes whether it's somebody that you really want to work with or not. So phone screens are super important. And then I think interviews are like the most important thing you can do. I've talked to people who have companies and they don't do their own interviews, and That's just surprising to me. I mean, there's just different theories about that, but I interview everybody. I'm not trying to pass myself off as a friend of Elon Musk, but I worked for him at PayPal. And Elon interviews just about everybody at SpaceX. I saw him at a Tesla event, and I was surprised to hear him say that he still interviews just about everybody SpaceX hires. That's how important he thinks that is, and he's running 2 really big businesses. So interviews are really important. Take the time, really, have a program, have some questions that you want to ask people, and get to know the person, because a bad hire is so painful. You waste so much time and energy and money on a bad hire. It's bad both ways. It's bad for the person you hired too. So spending that time is really important. Okay, final few thoughts about people. Telecommuting and remote employees are a big deal these days. The technology certainly makes it very possible to have remote employees. What I've found is that if you've been working with somebody and then for whatever reason they decide that they want to move to New Mexico and you keep working with them, that just works great. But if you've never met them and they're in New Mexico and you only see them once every other week or something, that just doesn't work as well. It's suboptimal. So if you can get everybody in one place, it's better. It really is better. I know that there are companies, even IceFinder, I have people, my partners are not all in the same place, but these are people that I've worked with for many, many years, so we already have the relationship. Interns, I think interns are like awesome. This is such a great thing to have interns. It's a good value. I mean, you can pay an intern $20 an hour, and they're delighted because that's like more money than they thought they could ever make doing anything. And at the same time, it's a lot less than a full-time employee would cost you. And it's really great. You get all this energy. And what's important with interns, though, is to recognize that they have a small flywheel. It's a funny thing. When people are in school, they get acclimated to doing things as fast as they can. Like I have this chemistry project I have to do, so I'm just going to do it as fast as I can and turn it in. Then I'm going to go do this thing, and then I have to do this project, and I'm just going to kind of check them off. And what you really want is you want them to take time and do a really great job and like do the best job they could possibly do, which is not necessarily how, I'm generalizing here, but not just generally how college students think. So that takes a little bit of time. I had an intern, he ended up being great, but I asked him to do a market survey and find every company that could conceivably be a competitor, go to their website and learn as much as they could about that company, and then fill out an Excel spreadsheet with that information. And I was thinking this was going to be like a 2 or 3 week project for this intern. And so later that afternoon, he came back to me and he said, what should I do next? And that was like the ultimate example of this. And I was like, well, what you should do next is, let's go back and do this really carefully and learn as much as we can. So that's just something to be aware of with interns. But you can just like, yes, sir. Right. I don't know if you could hear in the back, but he's pointing out that another thing with interns that are students is you get their professor's expertise. And that is absolutely true. And interns also are part of their own networks. So I've had generations of interns, like friends who came back and worked for me, because of previous interns. Yes, sir.
Do you often hire interns?
Sometimes I do. The question was, do I often hire interns? I don't know about often, but it has definitely happened that I liked an intern and they wanted to work for me, and so it worked out later. And yeah, that's value both ways if you can get that. The worst thing about interns is the lack of continuity, which kind of leads me to contractors. The problem with contractors is that they sort of come in and do their thing and leave, and they don't have any skin in the game. So although it may be that what you needed was just some specialized help, I needed to get a WordPress server up, and so I hired someone to do that, and I'm not going to need that every month for the rest of my company's life, so that was a good contractor kind of a project. But they don't have to live with that website after they're gone. You know, they set it up and then they're off. And meanwhile, you know, you discover that all the plugins they loaded have back doors. And people from Serbia are now inspecting your database code. So that actually happened to me, and it was not a good thing. So I think you just have to balance with contractors, right? It's a good thing and a bad thing. Okay, final subject, marketing. Super, super important. So, you know, I kind of told you a little bit about my business life. I was at Digital Insight, I was at Intuit, PayPal, Apereo, now I've got IceFinder. These are all tech companies, and IceFinder hasn't been successful yet, but the other companies were all successful. And yet, none of them succeeded because of technology. None of them. They all had really great technology. They had to in order to be successful. But it was only necessary, it wasn't sufficient. The thing that's really important is marketing. The thing that sets a company that's really going to be successful apart from its competitors and other people who see that same opportunity. And I'm not just talking about marketing like, you know, tweeting and putting out awesome press releases and running great events. I mean, that's all important. But it's kind of the high level of who's my market, what's the business model, what's my story to those people, how am I going to charge them, that kind of marketing. So I just kind of like a checklist of things to do. You know, right up front, like these guys, name, logo, domain, identity. I think it's important to be Googleable. You know, you want people to be able to find you. One thing that strikes me at these events is people get up and they say, I'm Ole Eichhorn and my company is, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, what was that company's name? And you really want to get it because you were excited about what they were doing. So, you know, you have to communicate that, and it has to be memorable. And then later when someone Googles it, you want them to be able to find you. I have a friend who was working with a company, and they were called, I can't even remember, Apollo Services. And you know, when you Google Apollo, it's just generic. It's like Googling the. And I couldn't find them. So this is a terrible name, even if they love Apollo. And you know, I think this is part of your story, right? The tagline, the elevator statement. You have to be able to get up in front of people and in 1 minute talk about what you do. And the tagline should say what you do. This is not an opportunity to be clever. This is an opportunity to be clear. What do you do? Like our tagline at IceFinder is take a picture, do a search. That's pretty clear, right? You can see what we do from that tagline. There's probably other problems we have as a company, but we do have a good tagline. This is all sort of anti, right? Create a good website, get on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. This is stuff that you just do in 2015. And it's not even hard, but it's really important to do this. And it's not, what I like to say is this stuff is like a garden. It's not like building a building. It's something you have to keep doing. You know, you have to go out there and water and pull weeds and just have somebody in your team that does this because it's super important. It's your presence. And I think it's really helpful. This is not essential, but it's my own kind of bias. I think it's really helpful if your company, especially in the early days, has a personal voice. Have any of you guys ever heard of Robert Scoble? So Robert Scoble, he's a blogger, and a little while ago now, Robert joined Microsoft, and he started blogging about Microsoft. He was already pretty well known, and blogging was a kind of a smaller world at that time. But it made a huge difference for Microsoft. Microsoft was just coming out of this enormous lawsuit where they were this monopolist, and you know, they were the evil empire, and nobody wanted to work with them, and no one wanted to use their products. And Robert's blogging put a personal face on the company that was super, super important. And he, you know, his blogging was not press releases about Microsoft. It was a personal voice, and some of it was critical, and some of it was about Microsoft competition. And I can only imagine the arguments that they had internally over him doing that. But it was huge because it was like this real person, and it was interesting. So I think this, and it doesn't have to be a blog. It could just be you tweeting or somebody in your team tweeting, or it could be posts that you make on Facebook. You can tie these things together so that when you make a blog post, it tweets and it goes onto your Facebook. But having that sort of personal voice is really important. And just like IceFinder has a blog, and we blog about our competition. There isn't that much to say about our company that every week we can talk about us. But we actually find competitors and we talk about them, and we're complimentary, or we question what they're doing, or we say, gosh, that's an exciting opportunity. We should look at that. And as a result, there's a whole bunch of people that read our blog that that are just people who are excited about visual search, and they're not partners or customers or anything. It's a way of telling our story, telling our story with stories. So one thing that I think is really helpful is when you talk about your market, define your market so you're the leader. Okay, like when we talk about IceFinder, we're this little company doing visual search, and we're very careful to talk about us as doing visual search. We're not doing search. Because if we were doing search, we'd be competing against Google and Microsoft, and we would be 0.0001% of that market. But by doing visual search, we've defined a market that's small enough that we can be the leader in that market. And so we can talk about being the leader in visual search and not be contradicted. It's good to talk about how you're different from other people that are in your market. It's important to realize when you're doing something new, maybe your competition is people doing things the old way. When I was at Apereo, we were trying to convince pathology labs that digital pathology was the wave of the future and that it could save them money and help generate revenue and improve their service to their customers. Our competition was not some other company that was doing that. Our competition was people sitting at desks looking through microscopes. So we had to define that carefully and position ourselves in that way. And the other companies that were also doing what we were doing, they were on our side. We were working together to create this new market. In general, when you differentiate, it's better to differentiate on what you are doing for your customers than on how you do it. So, like, let's say you have a little visual search company, and you have an awesome algorithm for doing visual search that's way better than what other people are doing. Well, guess what? To the person who has an app on their phone that takes a picture of a shoe and wants to find it, they really don't care. They just care about whether you're able to find that shoe accurately, faster, and better than anybody else. So the differentiator has to be, we're really faster and more accurate at visual search, not we use vector quantization algorithms, which are, blah, 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 right? And so that's, for you yourself, you may be successful because of how you do it, but what's important is to differentiate on what you do. And that becomes part of your value proposition. I talked about distribution earlier and how critical it is as part of your story. I also think that it's really important when you're designing your marketing plan to think about how can you multiply your effort. So, I have this little company with an extremely limited marketing budget. I can't buy a Super Bowl ad. So if I want to get millions of people's attention, I can't do it that way. And I can post on my blog, but on a good day, I have like 250 visitors to my blog. So that's not going to get me that Super Bowl ad type of a reach. So I have to think in terms of, maybe I could get somebody to tweet about me who has a lot more followers than I do. Maybe I could post a YouTube video or get someone else who has a lot of viewers already to post a YouTube video about me. Maybe I could partner with somebody who's going to do a press release, and a lot more people pay attention to them than to me. And so think in terms of what things can you do that will multiply your reach in marketing? How can you get more bang for the buck? It isn't true that if you build it, they will come. That is not true. I mean, the App Store is full of super awesome apps that no one has ever downloaded or heard about. So the question is, how are you going to get people's attention so that they know about you? And if you're solving a problem that they want solved, that they will turn to you to solve it. Okay, my last slide. You thought I would never get here, huh? I do think this is really important as an entrepreneur, is to be honest. And I don't mean like don't embezzle money from your company, and you really have to be very introspective about what's working and what isn't, and have a culture in your company that it's okay to have things not work, and for people to say this is not working, and to really try to focus on problems. This is not easy to do. It's really hard. IceFinder. So I mentioned my career earlier in different companies I've been a part of. IceFinder is the first company where I was really the principal founder. I was part of founding teams before. And in other companies, when things didn't go well, I could always blame my partners, right? Like, if only we had done things my way, then everything would have gone perfectly. Now, if things don't go perfectly, it's really on me, and you just have to be willing to say that and admit it to yourself, and that's just so much more powerful than pretending that there's not really a problem when there really is. And that kind of leads to asking for help. It's really powerful. Ask your team for help. Ask your investors for help. Sometimes you feel like, I don't want to admit to my investors that I have a problem. I'm having trouble closing this deal. I told them 2 months ago that it was going to be closed 1 month ago, and it's still not closed, and I don't want to admit it to them. Well, that's one way to feel, but another way to feel is, ask them for help. How can I get this deal closed? I was really expecting it to be closed a month ago, and I feel bad that we haven't done it, but do you have any ideas? And, people just respond to that, right? I mean, they feel a lot better. Think about it as an investor. You would feel a lot better if the entrepreneur you had invested in is asking for your help and admitting that you didn't get the deal closed than he's hiding it from you. That's, it's just way better. So anyway, I just wanted to end with this. Don't be afraid to admit when things are not going well and ask for help. So thank you very much for your attention.